Facilitating and leading teams. Lesson 1. How to improve your team facilitation and leadership skills. Back in the 1980s, during the quality circle craze, many more people were taught the basics of team facilitation and group dynamics management than are taught those skills today. This is truly unfortunate because there are probably more teams in action today than there were at any given point in time 30 or more years ago. Why are these key team management skills not taught today? Are we to assume that we've learned and mastered these skills? Many teams struggle today because their team leaders and members have a low awareness of concepts such as groupthink and the process content model. Few team leaders know how to effectively manage group problems or use effective questions to unearth mental models. A lot of time and money is wasted as groups go off on tangents or fail to accomplish the established agenda, if an agenda is even used. Additionally, while probably millions of dollars are spent daily on meetings, meeting effectiveness is rarely tracked, and little is done to improve team leader effectiveness. By learning the basics of team facilitation and making an effort to be more effective at using these skills, you can significantly reduce meeting time waste. In turn, you'll get better results in less time from your meetings. It may even be possible to make it fun to attend meetings again, something one looks forward to instead of something someone sees as a necessary evil. Meetings should be a place for creating synergy, building relationships, and learning more about each other. Without the consistent use of solid facilitation skills, however, these goals will be not achieved. Which meetings do you enjoy going to, and which ones do you try to avoid? We have a team infrastructure design checklist in the book, and this workbook contains a variety of tools and exercises that are designed to help you create a supportive team infrastructure. Without a well-designed, systematic support infrastructure, team effectiveness will be difficult to achieve, let alone sustain over time. Listed below are the most common actions required to set up an effective team infrastructure. Use this checklist to gauge your progress should you choose to improve team effectiveness in your company or work group. And this checklist looks at overall infrastructure design, process or work team support, or then project and focus work team support. So 3 types of teams that we're going to talk about in this book. And this is a summary checklist where we can start looking at not only are we putting the teams in place, but are we effectively supporting them in terms of the information they need and other resources they need to be effective. Have you been there and done that right? Many would say that teams are a business fad of the past. These same people would also most likely say, we tried having teams once, but they just didn't work. Many people like myself who are still and will always be convinced that teams and teamwork are a mandatory ingredient for organizational effectiveness are often greeted with a been there, done that response when we encourage companies to learn more about the power of work, project, and focus teams. When people say they've been there and they've done that, my simple response is, have you done that right? This workbook is the product of my 40 plus years of experience working with teams, and I've learned so much over those 40 years. Many of the tools contained in this workbook were born out of frustration. I created the tools because nothing existed to meet the need. I've seen both project teams and process work teams do marvelous things. I've seen them have sustained success over several years. I've also seen effective team programs die from a lack of support. I've witnessed the frustration of frontline employees and managers alike who want to improve their company through teamwork, but they're either not given the chance or when they're given the chance, they're not properly supported. Teams aren't free and they're not easy, but they do pay back. They are value added if they're done right. It's my belief that they're necessary, especially when you consider my definition of teams. You see, I operate from the perspective that all companies, both large and small, have teams, unless they've got employees who never talk to or rely on anyone else as they do their daily jobs. And even then, you're going to have stakeholder teams, supplier teams. My perspective is also a bit cynical in the sense that I feel most teams in existence are far less effective than they could be. Effective teams are necessary for high performance. We see this played out in the world of sports every day through both positive and negative examples. Unfortunately, both positive and negative examples of team effectiveness also exist in the workplace on a day-in, day-out basis. A lot of human potential, creativity, and energy is wasted each day in companies because the leaders of those companies choose not to harness the collective power of each person in their organization. Is your organization in this group? It's been more than 40 years since I started working with teams. In more recent times, we saw Kaizen teams and Six Sigma teams become the rage as lean thinking and Six Sigma became popular performance improvement approaches. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that we've learned from those mistakes that led to the death of quality circles and self-directed work teams in so many companies. We have not yet learned how to install the type of infrastructure and support systems, and especially leader standard work job designs that are needed to sustain team excellence over time. The tools in this workbook help you create a support system for making your day-to-day process work teams, your focus teams like safety committees and recognition teams, and your formal project teams more effective. You'll also learn why all three team types are needed for high performance. Because process work teams provide daily incremental process continuous improvement, focus teams support strategic objectives, and project teams contribute innovations that result in quantum leaps or step changes in organizational output. One final disclaimer. This workbook should not be seen just as a tool that management uses to make the frontline workforce more productive. Just as I believe that most teams are less effective than they could be, I also believe that management teams are among the worst offenders. Now let's see what's involved with making all of your company teams more effective. Let's start building better organizations. We've got a summary of key team effectiveness myths and questions. And real quickly, I'm going to have you take a look at 8 myths I've identified over the years and what exists in most organizations and where we'd like to be if you want to be a high performer. So for example, do you know how many teams you have in action? Most organizations don't. How many teams do you need to support the organization's strategic objectives, to support its continuous improvement needs? Number 2, are teams the best way to get lots of projects completed? A lot of people think so. But there's times where maybe individuals could fast cycle projects, or a mix of team and individual work is better than pure team-based project work. But how many projects are currently being worked on by teams? Are they working on the right ones? Are our resources being used in the right places? Myth number 3, we should always form teams to help solve our problems. In fact, some think that's the first step of problem solving. Form a team. But no, think about it. What types of projects do you currently assign to teams? Do you have the capability and capacity to form a team for every problem? When do you run out of effective team leaders? When do you run out of effective team members? How will you determine whether a project goes to a team or an individual? Myth 4, we all know how effective each team is. Well, to do that, you got to know what you expect from each team more than a completed project, and a lot of folks may not have a complete scorecard in place to look at the performance of each of their team types. So for work process teams, focus teams, and project teams, what measures should the different team scorecards contain? Another big myth is myth 5. Our teams do almost all their work in meetings. I mentioned the Baldrige virtual consensus process earlier. Meetings serve a very defined purpose, but they are not where most of the work is done. And they're definitely not a place where you should read to people. So how much between meeting time do each of your teams need for teamwork? What do you expect your teams to do in meetings? A lot of people do training of their teams up front and then put them to work, and then people forget everything. It's much better at times to train as you go. So how effectively is the training you provide to your teams being retained and applied? Myth 7, our teams select projects that benefit the organization the most. Well, what criteria do your teams use to select their projects? And what can we do to teach our teams about the cost of doing business? You need both items. You definitely don't just let them vote. Even if it's a leadership team, you don't let them vote. There should be selection criteria, and we should understand the cost of doing business and not just the hard cost. The soft costs matter too. And the final myth, myth number 8, our team leaders are determined by the job position they hold. If you're a supervisor, you get to be a team leader. Not the best strategy. Some people just aren't that good at working with folks, even though they hold a supervisor role. And when they have to manage a project in addition to the group process, they may break down. So first of all, what skills do each of our team leaders and facilitators need to have? And then once we have that selection criteria, that skill selection criteria, how do we identify and select people for team leadership roles? It's a key constraint in your ability to use teams to drive your organization forward. So think about a small coffee shop, one shift, 6 people. They're not going to have a whole lot of teams, but they still need to work together as a team, and they need to work in a variety of areas to be successful. So what's your operational definition of a team? How many teams do you have, and how many do you need? That's what we're going to look at in this workbook. Would you like to make your teams more effective? Has your organization experimented with teams only to be disappointed by the results they provide? Would you like to optimize the output of your existing project teams or process work teams? Have you thought about starting up a formal improvement team process or moving your process work teams towards self-direction, but you don't want to waste time and money? In general, teams are ineffective because they're not properly supported. The concept and tools that we describe in this workbook will help you balance the types of results you desire from teams against the degree of investment or support that you're willing to make. In turn, this helps you make all of your teams more effective. Implementing and maintaining an effective team process can be expensive, both in terms of the hard dollars required and in terms of the impact such a system's success or failure can have on the organization's culture. Many organizations don't consider these costs when they attempt to start formal teams. Even when they do consider them, they often grossly underestimate the resources required to make the process effective and obtain the types of payback they want. At least one work team already exists in any organization, unless all employees work in a non-interactive, isolated vacuum. Most organizations have several process work teams, but their level of self-direction is usually low. It's also likely that their daily efforts are not very aligned with or focused on the goals of the company if the team knows the goals of the company. They know what their supervisor wants, but do they know the goals of the company? In turn, many people hours are spent each day delivering less than optimum performance. In recent years, companies have invested money in Kaizen and Six Sigma teams, but they've struggled to sustain their effectiveness over time as well, primarily due to lack of a supportive infrastructure. So the concepts and tools in this workbook focus on 1, how we create operational definitions for different teams types, 2, identify the specific investments required to effectively implement and sustain different types of team infrastructures, and 3, balance expected results with these investment commitments. And so we're building a team infrastructure and teaching you how to facilitate teams. By using the tools to apply the concepts, you'll discover ways to get the most out of project teams or process work teams for the investment that you make, while also ensuring team involvement is a fun experience. By reading this workbook and working through the exercises, I hope you learn the following things. I hope you become able to better help team leaders develop the skills necessary to effectively lead and facilitate teams. I want you to be able to assess team effectiveness barriers and their potential impact. I want you to design a team infrastructure that will help you move closer towards your organizational improvement goals. I want you to be able to identify specific investment requirements for supporting different team designs. And finally, I want you to be able to create an action plan for implementing or improving an employee engagement system. If you want to increase the output of your teams, work on read on. To gain the most out of this material, involve a variety of employees in the reading, and especially the exercises as you come across them. This is facilitation practice. I've designed the exercises in this workbook so you can take them, get a group of people together, and work through the exercise with you practicing facilitation as you do. You have many teams at work each day in your company, and you rely heavily on their effectiveness to help you obtain the performance results that have been established. Do you need to improve the effectiveness of your teams?